Need all these hands. Good morning. Let me get my notes out here. How are you guys? Can you hear me? I mumble sometimes, so good. Yeah. All right. Cool. Yeah, chaos. So Katie actually set that up pretty nicely. But first, I do want to thank Katie Hicks and the whole team here. 3 points, CreativeMornings. For just giving me a shot at sharing some things with you that hopefully you take away, maybe a life lesson or two. But my name's Keith Neltner. I'm from Camp Springs, Kentucky. And earlier in the year, Katie's like, we've got all these themes, and one of them I think was craft and chaos. And at the time, I just was in this headspace. I was like, give me as much time as possible. Give me chaos. I'll take that one. So it's been chaos this year. So, but let's jump in here. All right, title slide. All right. Let's get one more. Okay, so a little bit about me. Some of you might know a little bit of my background, but my family came here from Germany in 1845, settled in along the river in Kentucky, and my family's been in Camp Springs ever since. So we have multiple generations. This photo is my great-grandfather there on the right, holding the beer and the cigar. That's late 1800s. So as I get older and my kids grow up and, you know, all these things start to take shape, my family heritage is really important to me and preserving it. So I'm really excited to keep discovering things about, you know, the generations before us that built something. So beer in the earlier photo there, and then in this one. So my grandpa is on the left there. He worked for Wiedemann in Newport. So he drove that horse and wagon. And this won't all be about old photos, by the way. But it was kind of cool when I'm going through these photos. I was like, beer, beer, and then, you know, our influence on beer in the community. So I grew up, which I think is pretty counter to maybe chaos. I grew up on a family farm. That's me up there with the Dukes of Hazzard shirt on, which is pretty great. But it was, in hindsight, a pretty quiet kind of upbringing. There was creativity present, but it was just in different ways. My dad could build things, and so there was creativity there, but it was surrounded by this family farm. So learned about work ethic, learned about the importance of family, and I don't know, I think that's where the Kentucky roots kind of, you know, took hold and was really important to me. This is also me with these Nikes on that were red and black, and early Donald Trump hair for everybody. But I loved art growing up, and I didn't know what that meant. I just, you know, I'd watch cartoons, I'd sketch, you know, images of wrestlers and He-Man and all this nonsense, and I didn't know what I would do with it, especially on a farm. So my career started in 1997. I went to a vocational school, which is now Gateway, and my early career was in healthcare advertising and a place called Scribner, then to Wonder Group, and then to a place called Landor, where I spent a lot of my career. And I really, along the way, started to be introduced to these creative people and friends that I still work with today. So that started to build this kind of network and really started to influence later on the people that I would collaborate with. So I wanted to start, I actually was going to end the presentation with this slide, and a lot of you may have seen on social media the quote, "Find what you love and let it kill you." Kind of floated around on Instagram. And I looked into that quote a little bit more, and I really thought a lot about, you know, why do we do this stuff? Like, why make it so hard? Like, just do your job, get on with it. But I switched out the word love for chaos, because I think if you find your chaos, whatever that means to any of us, getting here this morning might have been chaos, but if you find it and you love it, it'll become part of you, and it's not really a job anymore. So I also like the rest of this quote: "Let it drain you of your all, let it cling onto your back and weigh you down into eventual nothingness." Some days I feel like that. It's definitely a roller coaster to be a creative and try and make a professional path, when a lot of this stuff's really emotional and part of who you are. So this really teed up the presentation that I'm going to share with you. I'm going to share some work which was influenced by chaos, and these are things that I do maybe to cope as therapy with this life. So in 1999, I discovered Hank Williams III, who I was a big fan of the Williams family growing up, and realized there was a number 3. So I did a little bit of research and went to a show, which was like a 3-hour show. And it was just this wild, energetic, like visceral reaction to music and family lineage. And I created my first gig poster. And I didn't even know what a gig poster really was at the time. But I created this concert poster for him. And I, through a long series of events, got it to him. And he called my house pre-cell phone. And he said, "Let's work together." And I spent about a decade working with Hank III, and this is a sampling of some of the work. And the thing about working with musicians, it's chaos, because their life is in a completely different headspace than, you know, mine was. So you might get a call at midnight to talk about a piece of work, or you may not hear from them for a couple weeks. So it was really kind of this introduction to that genre that started to build this passion of, you know, even if I go to an agency, what can I do at home? What can I do on the side? Like, what can I generate some excitement and for my passion, for what I love. So the music work continued. It still continues, and the work you see here are recent pieces, but it also influenced me to collaborate with friends. So Rob Warnick, Tommy Sheehan, Chris Dye. I'll talk about some of them later too. But these are pieces that we created for bands. Willie Nelson, you know, iconic pieces that I'm super proud of. I also found that branching out and getting into other things that I wasn't comfortable with or knew a lot about, like filmmaking, for instance. That was really an opportunity to try something new, embrace new chaos, learn something, conquer it, and then move on to the next thing. So Charlie Lubin, who you see there on the left, is an incredible legend. Most people didn't know him by name, but we created a documentary about Charlie. Interviewed George Jones and Emmylou Harris, but this was definitely a passion project, and it just kept growing and leading to new things. So Shooter Jennings is another son of a legend that I had the great fortune of working with, and so he pushed me from the genre and from visually what could happen with country music and beyond. So these are recent vinyl pieces that were done for his dad. His dad's legacy is really important to him, so he enables me to influence something that's been around since the 70s and take a new spin and a new approach to it. And then vinyl. Cool format. Everybody loves vinyl. It's one of the only industries that has come back from almost extinction, which is incredible. So for an artist and for us, you know, at the studio, it's like, it's nice and big. So music has always been a part of my life, and it became part of the mix of work that I got to do. And then we had children. My wife Amy's in the back. She's awesome. And this is Emery and Quinn. Quinn was born in 2006 and Emery in 2010. I had always had one foot in, one foot out of being in a day job and an agency, and like just being really careful. I'm reckless, but I'm really careful. So I had the opportunity to work 4 days a week at Landor and always kind of do as much as I could on that off time, but also be there for my kids and my family. We all kind of grew up together. We worked on the farm, but I was always around my mom and dad. Like, I never really knew what it would be like to not see them, you know, the entire day. So I wanted that for us, and probably about 2010, really started pushing that idea and like building a studio and kind of being ready. So, so our kids were a huge kind of reason and jumping off point for that. And it's chaos. I mean, look at them. So somewhere around 2012, this notion of creating Neltner Small Batch, it had been Neltner Creative, terribly not creative name. But Neltner Small Batch, this idea of like really focusing on the work and the opportunity not to, you know, at the time I was a creative director and had this incredible team, but a lot of the time was spent on administration, on career paths and all these things, and I knew I needed to do the work. Like, that was what I wanted to do. So that was really important. I knew if we had a studio in Camp Springs, we could create this funky, cool work, and it was coming out of the place that I grew up in. And I always love that juxtaposition. Like, I like to surprise people and just give them something that they don't expect. So that was really important. But it also allowed, the idea of small batch was pulling in some basically veterans in the industry. So scale up a team when you need a team, scale down when the projects aren't there or things change or morph. So that was the inspiration to make the jump in 2013. But this is the studio that we built. My commute in the morning is about 30 steps to the top floor of the garage there. On the way home, the commute is the same, and sometimes I tell Amy, like, I really need about 20 minutes just to decompress. You know, this is over the hill from the farm that I grew up on, and it's our home. The studio, we do printmaking. Andy Sohoza, if you guys don't know him, he's incredible. But he's a master printmaker and has helped allow us to do printmaking kind of in-house and create screen prints that we can share with the world. But you know, it's a pretty focused block of time. You know, I don't drive to work. I probably should. But it's like focused work, and we make a lot of goods. We make a lot of stuff. All right, so things kind of changed as it was like, all right, you got to make this thing. You got to make this work. That was my focus. I spent a lot of time around people like Todd Lipscomb and Jeff Chambers and Rob, and we were scrappy. Like, we worked together, and we always wanted to make an idea bigger. Like, how could we do that? What could we do that would make people get a reaction out of people? So one of the things I realized was you have to establish a worth for what you do. So it doesn't always have to be monetary, but as a community, you know, creatives and in this business, it's easy to kind of just, you know, I got a friend that'll do that, or I'll do the, you know, it's easy not to have a value to something. So one of the things that I learned was place a value on it, even if it's not monetary, or even if it's a trade, but for the sake of our community and for your livelihood, put a value on it, because what we do is worth something. It gets a reaction out of people, and it's important. That sounded preachy. Sorry. Brands built by hand. In hindsight, like probably 6 months into a year, one of the things that we learned was a lot of the brands that we've created are they're from the ground up. We met Braxton and the family of Braxton at their house, and we were on the kitchen floor mapping out plans for their brewery. So those early times in that process, there's pain points that they reach. And every brand that we've launched, we can kind of like, okay, it's going to hurt right here. And then a week before they launch, it's going to really hurt. So, you know, the build out, a lot of times they're dealing with paint colors and, you know, just all this nonsense. But the things that you have to do to launch a brand. And it's a stressful time, but we've kind of learned to embrace it and head those, you know, pain points off and use our experience to kind of say, okay, you're going to survive in a year. It's not going to be about launching your brand. It's going to be about maintaining it. So HALFCUT is a brand that we created in OTR. It's a beer shop. The cool thing about HALFCUT, they were the first to say, you know, we've got a storefront. We want a mural. And at the time, we had never put paint on a wall. So, and that scale was pretty daunting. So it was like, can we pull this off? And Stacy Valerie, who's a really amazing painter, I confided in her, and I was like, can we do this? Like, is this possible? And we did. We pulled it off. It was over a course of 3 days, and it was the coldest weather we had in Cincinnati ever. There was a propane shortage. We walked into this space. I was like, no, guys, you got to have it all cleared out. And there were toilets sitting in there, and it was crazy. But we pulled it off, and it was another one of those, figure that skill set out, trial by fire. And then it kind of led to this, you know, 5-story giant, which was created for ARTWORES. And this was a piece, I think, done maybe a year or two later, but it's the first mural on the Brewery District Trail. And big honor to work with the ARTWORES team. And we created a documentary called Art and Craft. And again, another one of those things, like how do we make this something special? You guys with me? Everybody good? Okay, all right. So problem solving in an unstructured environment. A lot of our clients that we're fortunate enough to work with, there's not a structure in place. So you kind of have to create that structure so that then you can do your work within that structure and have them focus on the things that you need. So if you work for a large agency or large packaging, they have that structure. So you just come in, you do your job. So what this forced us to do was take 20 plus years of experience and strip it down to what we needed, use what works and discard the rest. So I'm going to take you through a few projects in varying degrees and share that with you. As I mentioned, Braxton was an exciting brand to build. I mean, I said this to somebody the other day, like there were like 5 breweries in Cincinnati when we did this. So it was like, here's the audit, this, and now there's just a ton. Like there's so many. It's really cool. But their aesthetic, and they had started in a garage. So we do a lot of research. We do a lot of like digging with them and figure out what they want their brand to be and stand for. So where dreams are made really was about this kind of launching pad, the garage being that thread. So we carry that through, and it influences the work. So we kind of always go back to that and say, all right, are we being true to that original vision? And this should make everything else a lot easier to kind of go through. Less subjective, more exciting. So we got to do their packaging, named a lot of their beers, did their interior, defined what photography might look like for them, did another mural, this one over the top of a bar. So signage was exciting. We'll do signage outside. There's the kids hanging out. So it might take a while, but good work attracts good work. I think if your standard isn't about getting it done and getting it out, and it's more about kind of the pride you take in it, that can really start to, especially over time, have a lasting impact on the body of work. So you have to practice, you have to collaborate. You know, it's more than a hashtag. You really have to like sweat. But we do get opportunities that are just a little bit of a surprise. So not to go too deep, but FERRARA Pan, I got a phone call from their marketing director. They're in Chicago, and he said, I'm really intrigued by the craft beer work that you guys do. Do you think we can do that for our candy brand? They had started in 1908. They're kind of small batch by process, so everything's made in copper kettles. But this was their chaos, and it was much worse than what I put on this slide. But a lot of these brands some of them had been retired, these characters. So it was exciting to kind of dip back into brands that I was familiar with and, you know, as kids. So again, we start with a lot of research, we distill it down, create the story, heritage and neighborhood. We're like, tell people who you guys are. No one knows who FERRARA Pan is. Visual influence, how could we bring craft to candy and what does that feel like, look like? So this is kind of the corporate brand mark that we had created. We imagined what would the shop have looked like in 1908. How do we explain what panning is, which is the copper kettles, but that's how Lemonhead and all the brands that you guys probably are familiar with, how they make the product. And then, you know, extending it out across packaging, so getting to reinvent Lemonhead. Got to work with the talented Rob Warnick on illustration. The dude can simplify stuff down and make you smile like so easily. I love it. And then the exciting thing is like all these different properties, all these different brands. How do you, as a designer, you kind of geek out like, how do I structure that? And what's the common thread? And so the original and Jeff Chambers wrote the lines, life gives you lemon heads, and you know, you better bet your beans. Just fun stuff. I mean, you guys are smiling right now. At least you guys are. So drill down to an idea and let it guide your decisions. You know, things are so chaotic. I lean more on like process and just organization than I ever thought I would, but it's the only thing that keeps you sane. But you have to rationalize your work. How many times has subjectivity come into a project? You know, I don't like that. Well, tell me why you don't like that. So if you can rationalize your work, organize, keep it simple, but make it smart. Like, again, surprise people with how you think. Couple examples. Boone County Distilling was a distillery that was actually the largest distillery in the late 1800s. But if you look in the bourbon history, it gets like one paragraph. And this place was a monster. It was this big in Petersburg, Kentucky. It was this giant factory. And the only thing left is a tiny foundation in the middle of the woods. It just disappeared. And our client wanted to bring that history back. So we were tasked with revitalizing that, resurrecting it, finding that history and piecing it together. which was really, really cool. It took that preservation idea to a whole new level. So this is kind of the timeline that we had developed. And Jeff wrote a line, made by ghosts. So, which I remember when Jeff sent that line, he's like, I think this is the one. So it set a tone for them. And this is how it kind of extended out into packaging. And we got to design a custom bottle with a group in Italy. Super exciting stuff. I said that in a super exciting way. So bourbon, the music aesthetic kind of helped attract beer and bourbon. So again, if you do good work and you can share that, people are attracted to it. So a group came to us. They were going to put a distillery in the basement of the Cavalier Hotel, which is in Virginia Beach. And they didn't have a name. They had a name, but it had a conflict. So they said, we'd love for you guys to name our distillery. And this place was built during Prohibition, but there were stories about people running out and getting, booze and whatever else and bringing it back. So it was really intriguing. Al Capone stayed there. Apparently Richard Nixon burned some of the Watergate tapes in the fireplace. Like Adolf Kors committed suicide there. Really nice stuff. So we dug into that history and we started to distill it down and came up with the name Tarnished Truth Distilling Company. So this idea that there is truth, but sometimes it's not the truth that it's not as pretty as you want it to be. So this is kind of the essence, and extended out to bourbon. This idea of like a 1927 Essex flying, down the ocean boulevard with the dame in the passenger seat and this crazy driver. We really like that idea, so we turned that into the icon. And history will recall us as one of the taglines. Again, kind of how does that extend out? What's it feel like off pack? This is a brand piece that we produce for them. All right, so we'll go from beer to distilling back to beer. Not all brands are the same, so it doesn't matter how you approach things. You're going to come across that group or that client that is just like, it's kind of how I want to do it. So we've been working with LIC Beer Project in New York for a couple years now. And at first, they're like, we think we want to package our beer, but we're just going to sell in kegs. And then quickly they realized the power of canning their beer and selling it really as limited edition art. So we try and put as much rationale in place, but at the end of the day, they're just like, do what you do. Like, we love it. Like, let's just take this canvas. Some branding rules go out the window. But the one thing that stays true is this idea of chaos contained, in this label. So, they'll give us Iron Maiden references and Basquiat. They love street art, and we kind of roll with it. This is a series on the top. We were influenced by Voltron, and Andy Sohos and I work on a lot of these, and I don't know, some days I'm like, the kids will come out after school and we're working on like these characters, and I'm like, this is what adults do. Like, I don't know, it's fun. This is a sampling. I think we've done like 40 different labels for these guys, and what's cool is like their Instagram and the social media is just kind of ballooned, and bloggers in New York they go nuts over the beer and the labels. So probably around 2015, I believe it was, but we had an opportunity. So the farm that I grew up on, there was an old tavern continuously operating since 1865. But it had seen its better days. So probably the last 30 years, People didn't really even know if it was open, except like the 5 guys that went in there. And, but we had a wild idea. Rick went on a tour with me, and we had this wild idea of what if we could turn this place into a destination? Like, what if we could create a brand for ourselves? All the pain points, we'll just absorb all that, but create something and use all of our skill set to do it. So we looked at this old tavern. It was a pain in the ass, liquor license, and it was a process. And we made it through that process and ended up buying the Camp Springs Tavern. So this was week 1. This was week 1, and we flipped this space within 4 days. So we didn't want to take any chances of the doors closing. We're just like, let's get in here. We should have filmed it because we probably could have made a TV show out of it. But you know, my family and my brothers in the community, Kevin is this incredible craftsman, and he jokes that, you know, I'll have the vision for something and then he makes it happen, and it's true. So now we own a tavern. And when we were looking at it, this is the oldest photo we have. This is probably early 1900s. And I pushed myself not to get caught up in the romance, because I'm like, this could be a could be a burner. But we saw potential, and we thought, you know, we host weddings at the farm. What if we had this cool little pub, you know, that people could come to? And so this image is incredible. That's Lion Brewing on there, that little beer sign. That's like just so cool. So we had the building challenges, which basically hadn't had a lot of love, but all the bones were under this place. So we kind of knew that. It was built with brick, and they built a church on top of the hill at the same time. So that was kind of cool, like church and a tavern. But the picture on the left is kind of that patio area, if you can call it that. And then the image on the right was taken a couple weeks ago. And that was a celebration that we had, and live music, and kind of bringing under one place creativity and music and community. Serving the beer and the brands that we get to work on was kind of was definitely the vision. The interior needed a little help there in the bottom left. But we knew the bones were there, so all the stonework, all that cool stuff was covered up. The cellar was completely full of junk there, so we got to work with First Ward, who's done a lot of cool work, and custom benches, but we kept it simple, and it's really about sharing that architecture that's, you know, around the middle of the country. We also see it as a celebration of the people that came before us too. A lot of people saw what we were doing. First, I think they were scared of it, and then after that, they decided, hey, my grandma hung out there when she was in her 20s. And so they shared these incredible photos, and they've shared ghost stories. We've had the ghost seekers, Cincinnati ghost seekers, come out. There's all kinds of ghosts apparently roaming around. This is the Tillers on the top right, and Michael Wilson. I don't know if you guys know him, but he's like a legend, a photographer from the West Side. We shoot music videos. Like, we want this to be basically a backdrop for creativity and sharing that with our friends and community. That's my mom right there, raising a beer in the middle. And also the art. Like, man, what if we could make, I don't know, one of Andy's first posters he did for an event, it was a singer-songwriter. It's like an 8-color screen print. He's like, can we go to that? I was like, yeah, we're making it, let's do it. So just being able to kind of bring, I mean, these are doodles that I would have done when I was a kid. Like, it's just, I don't know. Being able to like bring that forward and make it part of this place for as long as we can. So that early photo was so romantic to me. I thought about what if we could create an image of a beer delivery in the late 1800s. And Tom Post, who's an incredible illustrator, I shared this rough pencil with him, and he's like, I love that idea. And he created this piece of art, which now is a mural in the space. But again, it's all about those connections and those people that you get to work with. Apparel, we make t-shirts all the time. I don't know, it's an obsession. One of the last things I want to share is, again, this idea of using your skill set. What if you try something new? I can't play any instruments like I tried when I was a kid, and the idea of using art as part of music is really exciting. But the other idea was, hey, what if we could record something and make an artifact in Camp Springs, and then we could release it at the tavern. So Chelsea Ford and the Trouble is a great Americana band, and I just posed, I was like, hey, if you guys ever want to record here, this was like in May. She's like, how about June 7th? So she wasn't messing around, and so we had Rob Fugate come in, and he was the producer, and I was like, Rob, tell me if this works. Like, I haven't done this before. So they recorded in the space, and we created the art and the album, and it's their first album, and it's really cool to see the reaction of people seeing their music, hearing their music, and seeing the work. And I don't know, maybe in 5, 10, 20, 50 years, somebody will look back on this and be like, that happened. Like, so I just feel like this is our time to create and make a legacy if we can. How am I doing on time? All right, last slide. So create like there's no tomorrow. This idea of leaving a legacy, making artifacts, but I probably won't get to talk to this many people again for a while. So I just, I put the word love in there and put the idea of respecting each other. I think we live in this like chaotic world. We're in a culture that maybe isn't as positive as it should be. And I feel like we have an opportunity to change that, maybe through our art, but definitely how we treat each other. So just, that's it. Take care of each other.
Did I just ask?
Yeah.
I love seeing the just diversity of the work and how one kind of informs the other. And I don't know, I haven't had the privilege of working with clients in that way, but I was curious to see if part of the process there were any pushback that you've experienced, or has there been any projects where it didn't quite vibe, and I was kind of wondering if you have any tips or anything that you want to share on that.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. If you guys heard that, but she had asked if there was any pushback kind of as you go through the process. And there's always pushback. There's client stuff that we deal with. Fortunately, they're coming to us for something that they a lot of times respect what we do, and so we're able to work pretty smoothly. But we get the emails from clients that are like, Keith, I don't like this. And it's like, okay, well, but what we try and do is go back to rationale. So, if it's, hey, make this bigger, why don't we put a violator here? It's like, okay, let's step back for a second and realize that long term, you're not gonna like that. So pull examples, show them why we did what we did, and then compromise if you have to. Yeah.
So I'm like you, I have no musical talent, but I do love music and it inspires me. And seeing some of your work and Tommy's work and some other people I've worked with in the past, I've always wanted to get into doing music illustration or get posters and things like that. So do you have any recommendation for somebody like me who doesn't have a big connection of musicians?
All right. I think, you know, there's a few ways that kind of works. A lot of times you can either work with like a promoter locally, so they might be booking bigger bands. Rob and I did that for a little while when the House of Blues was running the Madison. Like, they would connect with us and say, hey, we'd love for you to do a poster. So it's not always direct connection with the band, but especially the way you can communicate with people through social media. A lot of times you can just ask, you know, and there's not always going to be a big budget, but there's ways to make it work for you as well. Like, you kind of just, you got to make that first one and then, you know, see where it goes from there.
Pick it up here.
What's that? Oh, I can pick. Yeah, that's easier, right? Anybody?
Yeah, so
Yeah, I'll
I was
pick.
just wondering if you could talk a little bit about building the team that you use when you guys are. So when you're, you know, creating a new project for somebody, do you have a set group of people that you always work with? Do you contract out? Like, how do you pick that team to go forward with stuff?
Yep. Thanks. So, like I mentioned, the team, a lot of times, as soon as we know what the client personality is going to be, it's like, yep, we know who the team's going to be. I'm kind of at the center of it, and then, you know, Andy Boussard's a strategist. There's a lot of veterans that we get to kind of plug into to create the team. But Jeff Chambers does a ton of our writing, and then illustration tends to be what personality are we trying to communicate. And then, you know, specialties like photography and video and stuff, we just tap into people that, I hate to say it's about, you know, friendships, but it's like you want to work with people that you're going to make the best product when there's a rapport there, and that's, you know, that's kind of how we go about it. So, is that a straight answer or kind of? Yeah.
Maybe they don't.
You get to pick.
I get to pick? All right, go for it. How do you find balance in the chaos?
It's so when we the most chaotic it's been, I think, is when we bought the tavern and we opened that thing. You know, it was like we were learning things like putting a whole new POS system in place. I don't know anything about that, but I learned. I don't think it could be possible if it wasn't, you know, right in Camp Springs. So I tell people all the time, like, we would never have opened the tavern and anywhere else, really. It was just the opportunity. And I think Amy and I do a really good job. Like, my biggest fear has always been, like, I don't want our kids I don't want to skip a beat. Like, so I don't think I've ever missed a baseball game. You know, 4 o'clock is ballet practice. So, you know, it's like, it's all there. It's like this one big thing. It's one big life. So, but it is stressful at times, for sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
I guess kind of as you grew just your company, how did you determine like a pricing structure as you kind of work client to client?
Yeah. The idea of a pricing structure, if everybody didn't hear that, it's tough. Like, it's you know, people are in different markets, they're in different industries. So, and when you get into creative industries like, you know, beer making, distilling, music, there is someone that is like, man, I just want to do that. So it's really, setting that value is tricky. But, you know, we have a lot of experience with the agency world. We're not an agency, but if I were to tell people the value that you get for the price structure, because I mean, we've got a lot of experience, you know. That's not a bragging thing. It's just, man, we're old. So we try and work really smart. There's not a lot of layers. So if the budget's not big, it's like, let's attack this thing let's, do what we do, and, So I think maybe it's speed sometime, like just knowing your craft really well, and just, is the thing that you're going to make on the output, is it worth it? Like,
You like seem just so prolific with your work, and I'm wondering like how do you balance your life and like find enough hours in the day? Do you sleep?
I didn't sleep last night worrying about this presentation. Yeah, I mean, I don't. Early on, the music stuff, like that was, midnight burning it, But again, Amy might say otherwise, but I've really like tried to carve those time, okay, this is family. And then just, I don't know, maybe if you saw me work, you just see how bouncy I am, and like just driven to like, if I don't get this done today, it's going to be there tomorrow. So not a great answer, but yeah, efficiency.
But really, how many hours of sleep do you get at night?
I do all right. I don't know. Kids go to school at 7:20, so we're rolling up at 6. So.
Yeah, good. Do you follow a process every time, or does it depend on the project and how much time you have, or what does that look like?
Usually there's a form of a process. Yes, there's a process. And one of the reasons, if I start a project, even if it's, let's say it's a poster, if I don't research, get inspiration, like it kind of starts to wane or fall apart. So I fall back on process just to keep me honest, and, Yeah, and it's, especially if you can share that with a client. Even as crazy as some of those beer cans are, there is rationale in why we're making those decisions. So, yeah.
It looks like your market is the United States. So how do you ascertain what people's needs are to create a marketing campaign to meet those needs in the different segments that you experience?
Well, like Virginia Beach, for instance, use the distillery there as an example. We'll go through a process. We'll do a worksheet, questionnaire, whatever, with the client, and ask those questions like, who are your competitors? What's the market like? We're pretty thorough in that, like understanding their audience, who they want to talk to, what appeals to them. So we kind of follow all the traditional pieces and parts, but a lot of the work is out of the city. Not really on purpose. It's kind of been organic, like through Oh Beautiful Beer and some other blogs and things like that. A lot of times calls come from that, some of those online features that people are just attracted to. So.
Yeah. So when you were younger, did you ever have to do free work to like because you wanted to, because of a passion project, or because you wanted to?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the early like Hank 3 stuff, there were no budgets there. There wasn't a record label behind that, so a lot of it was pro bono. And again, that's like as you get into it and you learn, like setting a value, whether that's monetary or it's going to get your work seen, is important. And over 10 years, like I created a brand that people could look at and it influenced kind of a genre. And so you kind of build up to it, build those budgets kind of as you go.
We got time for one more question.
She hit it.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Through your whole journey and adventure in this process, what has been the most surprising skill that you've developed that you never expected would be part of this journey?
Man. You held that till the end.
Last question.
The question was, what is a skill set or something that was surprising in the journey? I mean, I hate to say something as boring as project management, but I'm sorry if there's project managers. You guys are awesome. But no, really, it never, it's kind of counterintuitive to being creative, but it's been super important just to keep my head on straight and not let anything, fall. Like, keep them together.
Thank you guys for coming.
Thanks, appreciate it.